When interpreters go to interpreting school, they, just as a musician who learned to play an instrument, are taught to practice and told to practice. And they do that a lot. Interpreters at school or at an interpreting program spend hours and hours of practicing. And the same thing goes for after you graduate from your interpreting program and you want to pass an accreditation test, for instance, at the European institutions. But once you have passed the test, or once you have your range of regular clients, you don't necessarily practice, and you don't necessarily work with colleagues to practice. Whereas musicians, even if you play in the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, you would continue to practice every day for hours and hours, and you would also continue to take music lessons. Now, I would compare interpreters to musicians in that in how we train and how we can improve ourselves. Because I find that for an interpreter to improve, let's call it the main skill of interpreting, the transfer of your message, the way you do when you interpret, has a lot of resemblance to how you improve when you learn to play a violin better. Your understanding, your treating of the message is your instrument, like the violin for a musician, for instance. So for an interpreter to be able to sit down, decide what you would do for an exercise, and work very intensely with a particular exercise, and maybe with a good colleague also, listening and giving feedback, would be very interesting in order to improve one's interpreting skill. If you can just record yourself for a short while, and if you work for the institutions, it's perfect because most of the institution material is recorded, right? So you can go back to a recorded material and you can actually listen to yourself. And you don't need to listen to yourself for a long time. I mean, we are professional interpreters, we listen a lot to interpretation. So just by listening to yourself for a very short while, we would be able to identify which areas we would like to improve or where we would like to be better. Not saying that we are underperforming, just saying that we will be able to be even better if we identify areas where we can improve. It's also very easy to fall into bad habits if you don't listen to yourself. And despite the fact that you may convey the message very well as an interpreter, maybe you have a lot of false starts, for instance, or anomalous stress, so that you will pause in the middle of a sentence where there's no full stop, where there's no end of the sentence, there's no full stop. And these are things that we are not aware of if we don't listen to ourselves. And it may not conflict the message, or it may, because if the listener is irritated on the way it's presented, it conflicts the message anyway. But even if it doesn't conflict the message, it will still be a performance that is not something that is felt as if the speaker was delivering it firsthand. A good enough interpreter, let's call it a routine expert interpreter, is an interpreter who can easily work for the European institutions because it is very challenging to work here. And you have enough knowledge about interpreting and about your task to perform every day in the booth a good enough interpreting routine. Whereas the expert interpreter, the adaptive expert interpreter, is the interpreter who is like an artist, who can convey every feeling, who can make the listener understand the message as if it was presented firsthand, as if the interpreter was the speaker and not just a tool behind.